They whispered about her in the fields long before the sun rose, when the air was still heavy with the night. A woman who had done the unthinkable. She had defied the master. On a plantation where silence was survival, where obedience was beaten into the skin, where even looking a man like Lucien Moreau in the eyes could cost you your life, one woman had looked straight at him and refused to break. No slave dared breathe the story too loud, because everyone knew what came next. When a master was defied, the punishment was not just cruel, it was unspeakable. Her name was Amara. Lucien had marked her years ago, pulling her from the rows of cane to make her his favorite. In his eyes, she was nothing but property, a body he could command like the fields he owned. Each night he summoned her, and each night she returned hollowed out, her silence hiding the wounds no whip could carve. Others pitied her. Some envied her because her back bore fewer scars. But all of them knew she carried chains far heavier than iron, until the night she stopped bowing her head. Lucien had struck her, the back of his hand sharp across her cheek, because her eyes had lingered too long on his face. She did not look away. That was the moment everything changed. A single stare, steady and unbroken, was more dangerous than any blade. The next morning, even with her cheek bruised and swollen, Amara walked into the fields with her shoulders straight. She whispered to the others that she had not cried, had not begged, had not broken. The words rippled like fire across dry cane, sparking something that had been buried deep in the soil of their suffering. For the first time in years, the slaves felt something other than fear. They felt possibility. At first it was only whispers, but whispers grew. Josiah, an older man whose body was a map of lashes, pressed close to her in the quarters and asked what she meant to do. She answered with only one sentence, her voice low but sharp as steel. "We are not theirs. We never were." The silence afterward was deafening. For people who had lived entire lifetimes in chains, the thought was dangerous, yet it was also intoxicating. That night, small things began to shift. A tool went missing from the barn. A lantern accidentally spilled oil, leaving part of the estate dark. Food spoiled before it reached the master's table. Lucien noticed, of course. And when he punished them with whips, Amara met the overseer's gaze with the same fire she had shown Lucien. Each lash across her back was met with silence, her jaw locked, her eyes refusing to lower. And the others saw it. They felt it. Her defiance became theirs. The breaking point came on a storm-thick night when Lucien himself barged into the quarters, his voice slurred with rum and rage. He dragged Amara into the dirt before everyone, shouting that he would make her an example. His hand gripped the whip, his face twisted with fury, but before he could strike, Josiah stepped forward and wrenched the whip from his grasp. The air froze. Lucien staggered back, stunned, reaching for his pistol. But then Amara's voice cut through the roar of rain on the roof. No more. 2 words. That was all. But they carried the weight of centuries. The slaves rose as one. Their eyes burned like torches in the dark. Lucien, who had ruled them with terror all his life, suddenly found himself staring into a sea of faces that no longer feared him. He stumbled backward, pistol shaking, but the sheer force of their rage pressed him out of the quarters. His guards dragged him away before the crowd could tear him apart. For the first time in his life, Lucien Moreau, the master, was the one who fled, and Amara, blood still drying on her skin, felt something rush through her veins that she had thought long dead. Power, but she knew the truth even as the slaves murmured in awe around her. The master would not let this stand. He would return with fury, with fire, with vengeance, and when he did, what awaited them all would not just be cruel, it would be unspeakable. The morning after Lucien's retreat, the plantation breathed in a silence so sharp it cut the air. For years, dawn had always begun with the crack of whips, the bark of overseers, the shuffle of bare feet across dirt. But on this day, the masters did not appear. The guards lingered near the big house, their faces grim, their hands heavy on muskets. Something had shifted. Everyone knew it. The slaves whispered Amara's name like a prayer. She had stood against the master and lived. She had spoken 2 words, no more. And it was as if chains had begun to loosen in every heart. Some smiled for the first time in years. Others trembled, knowing joy was dangerous, that hope was a fire the master would try to stamp out. Amara herself did not smile. She knew Lucien Moreau. She knew the kind of man who believed his power was absolute, his will divine. For him, last night was not humiliation. It was war. She knelt in the dirt of the cane fields, hands gripping the earth, whispering to herself the truth she had carried since childhood. They can break our backs, but they cannot break what we carry inside. But as she whispered, she saw the fear in the eyes around her, mothers clutching their children, men pretending to be strong while their hands shook. That night they gathered in the quarters again. Smoke from oil lamps curled in the thick air. Faces glistened with sweat, shadows dancing on the walls. Josiah stood beside Amara, the whip he had stolen from Lucien hidden beneath his cot like a trophy. His voice was gravel as he spoke. He will come back. And when he does, he won't come alone. Murmurs rippled through the room. They knew what it meant. Retaliation, punishment. Unspeakable things they had all heard of but prayed never to face. Entire villages burned. Families torn apart. Women dragged into the big house never to return the same. "We fight," Amara said. Her voice was calm, steady, but every syllable throbbed with conviction. "If we bow now, it will be worse than death. If we rise, we might yet see the sun as free souls." Some shook their heads. Old Samuel, his beard gray, his back bent from years of lashes, muttered, "Child, you don't know what you're saying. The master's cruelty runs deeper than the river. You think he'll stop at you? He will burn us all." Amara met his gaze, unflinching. "Then let him burn. But we will not kneel." A silence followed, heavy, dangerous. And then Josiah's fist struck the wooden wall. "I'll stand with her," he said. "Better to die a man than live as his beast." One by one, others nodded. Not all, but enough. Enough to spark something bigger than fear. The next day, the retaliation began. Lucien returned. Not alone, but with riders from neighboring estates. They thundered down the dirt road, muskets on their backs, whips coiled at their sides. Their horses' hooves sent clouds of dust spiraling into the air, and from the fields the slaves watched in silence, hearts pounding. The master dismounted before the quarters, his face pale with fury. He did not speak at first. He only stared, his gaze sweeping across the gathered slaves until it landed on Amara. "You think you can shame me?" His voice was low, but venom dripped from every word. "You think you can raise your eyes to me and walk away breathing? You forget what you are." Amara stepped forward. The others held their breath. "We are not yours," she said. "We never were." Gasps rippled through the crowd. The guards shifted, uncertain. Lucien's face twisted, and in a sudden motion he struck her across the face with the butt of his pistol. She crumpled into the dirt, blood on her lips, but she did not cry. She did not beg. She lifted her head, eyes blazing. Lucien's fury ignited. "If you will not be broken," he hissed, "then you will be erased." He snapped his fingers. Two guards dragged a boy forward, a child no older than 12. His mother screamed, clawing at the men, but was thrown back into the dirt. Lucien's pistol aimed at the boy's head. The slaves erupted in cries, pleas, curses. Amara struggled to her feet, her body trembling but her voice sharp. "It's me you want." "Not him." Lucien's cold smile cut through the chaos. "It's all of you I want. And I will teach you what happens when one of mine dares defy me." The crack of the pistol shattered the air. The boy collapsed. His mother's scream ripped through the fields, a sound so raw it seared the night itself. The slaves froze, horror locking their limbs as Lucien lowered his weapon, smoke curling from the barrel. "This is the beginning," he said softly. "And I promise you, what comes next will be unspeakable." He turned and walked away, leaving the child's body in the dirt, the mother wailing, and the slaves staring in stunned silence. Amara stood, blood dripping from her brow, her heart pounding with grief and rage. She knew in that instant that there could be no turning back. The rebellion was no longer just about freedom. It was about survival, and the price of defiance had only just begun. The boy's body lay in the dirt until the sun bled over the horizon. His mother's cries had long since turned to hoarse whimpers, her arms wrapped around his lifeless frame, as if warmth might return. No one dared move her. No one dared bury him. His small face still, eyes open to the sky, became a silent monument of what Lucien had promised. The beginning. That night. The quarters were not filled with whispers, but with silence. Heavy, suffocating, the kind of silence that comes before storms. Amara sat in the corner, her body aching, her cheek swollen where the pistol had struck. But her pain was nothing compared to the fire that burned in her chest. She could still see the smoke curling from Lucian's pistol, hear the boy's body hit the ground, hear the echo of his mother's scream. Josiah broke the silence first. His voice was gravel and thunder. He will not stop. Tonight it was the boy. Tomorrow it will be one of us. Then all of us, no one argued. Amara lifted her head. Her voice was low, steady, and sharper than steel. Then we do not wait for tomorrow. Dozens of eyes turned to her, some wide with fear, some with the fragile glimmer of hope. Old Samuel spat into the dirt, shaking his head. Child, you'll get us all killed. You saw what he did. You think we can fight muskets with our bare hands? You think courage stops bullets? Amara leaned forward, her eyes locked on his. Courage doesn't stop bullets. But neither does silence. Neither does bowing. You think if we do nothing, he'll spare us? No. He'll take us one by one until nothing is left but ghosts in his fields. Her words hung heavy in the room. The fire cracked in the oil lamp, shadows twitching on the walls like restless spirits. Josiah pulled the stolen whip from beneath his cot and tossed it into the center of the floor. The leather coiled like a snake. This was his weapon. Now it's ours. Maybe we don't have muskets, but we have fire. We have blades hidden in the cane. We have the dark. And most of all, he glanced at Amara. We have nothing left to lose. A murmur spread through the room. For the first time, the silence cracked, giving way to something else. Anger. One of the younger men, Isaiah, barely 20, clenched his fists. We burn the cane. Without it, he has nothing. No crop, no profit. Burn it all to the ground. A woman with a baby on her hip shook her head. And what about our children? Where will we hide them when he comes for us? Amara stood, her back straight despite the bruises that marred her skin. She raised her hands to quiet them. He will come whether we burn or not. The question is, will we meet him as slaves or as people who fought back? The room grew still, and then slowly, one by one, heads began to nod. The decision had been made. That night, the first embers of rebellion sparked. They moved in silence, shadows slipping between rows of cane. A stolen flask of oil passed from hand to hand. Sparks lit against flint. Small flames coaxed to life, then fed to dry stalks thirsty for fire. The fields roared alive in orange and gold. Smoke billowed into the night sky, thick and choking, blotting out the stars. The slaves watched from the edge of the trees, their eyes reflecting the blaze. For once it was not them burning under the master's lash. It was his world, his wealth, his pride, consumed by fire. But the triumph lasted only moments. The riders came. Lucien at their head, his face twisted with fury, his pistol gleaming in the firelight. Muskets cracked, bullets slicing the night. The slaves scattered, some screaming, some clutching children, some frozen in terror. The riders cut through the smoke like demons, whips lashing, sabers flashing. Amara's heart pounded as she darted through the cane, flames licking at her heels. Josiah was beside her, swinging the stolen whip with savage strength, dragging one rider from his horse. The man screamed as he fell into the fire. Isaiah drove a rusted blade into another's thigh, pulling him down into the dirt. For the first time, the slaves struck back, not as broken bodies, but as warriors. But Lucian was not a man to retreat. His pistol barked again and again, bodies crumpling in the dirt. The smoke thickened, the fire spread, chaos swallowing the night. Amara stumbled, choking, her vision swimming. A hand grabbed her arm. It was Josiah dragging her toward the trees. Go! He roared, get them to safety. But Amara dug her heels into the earth, turning back toward the fire, toward the screams, toward the master who still stood tall in the inferno. Her eyes locked on Lucien, and for a heartbeat their gazes met across the blaze. His lips curved into a cruel smile. This was only the beginning, and Amara knew it. The rebellion had been born, but the price had only begun to be paid. The fire smoldered for 2 days. The cane fields, once Lucian's crown of wealth, lay in ash and smoke. Blackened stalks jutted from the earth like the bones of a corpse, and the air stank of ruin. For the slaves, it had been a glimpse of freedom, to see the master's treasure burn. But for Lucien Moreau, it was a wound that demanded blood, On the third night, the storm broke. The riders came back, more of them than before. Not 10, not 20, dozens. Lanterns swung from their saddles, casting halos of light on grim faces. They dragged wagons behind them, wagons covered with chains and iron. The sound of hooves thundered through the night, and with it the air grew thick with dread. In the quarters, the children clung to their mothers. The men stood tense, their makeshift weapons hidden but ready. Amara's heart pounded as she whispered to Josiah, "They're not here just to punish. They're here to destroy." The doors of the big house swung open, and Lucien emerged. He was dressed not in the finery of a master, but in black, a coat that swallowed the lantern light, boots that crunched on gravel, gloves that gleamed with oil. His face bore no rage now, only calm, the calm of a man who had already decided the shape of his cruelty. He stopped before the quarters, flanked by armed men. His voice carried across the night like a sermon. "You burned what was mine," he said. "You thought you could raise yourselves above your station. You thought you could defy me and live?" His eyes searched the crowd, settling on Amara. "And so tonight I will teach you what happens to those who forget who they are." He raised his hand. At the signal, his men dragged forward 3 captives. The slaves gasped as lantern light fell on their faces. 2 men, 1 woman, all slaves from the neighboring estate. Blood streaked their clothes. Shackles bit into their wrists. They had been beaten, but their eyes were still alive with fear and defiance. "These," Lucien said, his voice cold, "are the price of rebellion. Their master gave them to me, to do with as I please, as warning to all of you. Watch closely." Before anyone could move, one of the riders unsheathed a blade. The night split with a scream as the woman's hand was severed at the wrist. Blood sprayed into the dirt. Children wailed. Mothers covered their eyes. The woman collapsed, sobbing, her arm a fountain of red. The men in chains fought, but Lucien's guards pinned them. Another blade flashed. Another scream. Fingers hit the dirt, a hand. Blood dripping onto the earth like rain. Amara bit down on her own cry, nails digging into her palms. She forced herself to stand tall, to watch, though her stomach churned, though her knees trembled. Lucien turned to his slaves, his voice sharp. "Do you see? This is mercy. I could kill them. Instead, I break them, so they live as reminders of what awaits you all if you continue this madness." But it wasn't mercy. It was spectacle. A theater of horror meant to chain their souls tighter than iron ever could. The woman fainted. The 2 men were dragged back, their blood painting the dirt. Lucien's gaze never left Amara. "You lit the fire," he said softly, though all could hear. "I saw it in your eyes. You led them. And so when the time comes, you will not just die. You will wish for death." The crowd shuddered. The children sobbed louder. The mothers clutched them tighter. But Amara, bruised, bloodied, trembling, met his gaze and did not look away. "Then you will have to kill every one of us," she whispered, her voice breaking but unbowed, "because we will never kneel again." A ripple of courage stirred among the slaves, faint but real. Josiah stepped beside her, his jaw tight, his hand resting on the hidden whip. A few others raised their chins, eyes burning despite their fear. Lucien saw it, and his calm cracked just for an instant. His lips curled into a cruel smile. "So be it," he said. With a flick of his wrist, he gave the order. The riders surged forward. Torches flew into the thatched roofs of the quarters. Flames leapt skyward. Screams split the night as fire devoured wood, and smoke choked the air. Mothers fled with children in their arms. Men scrambled to douse flames with bare hands, but the riders slashed at them with sabers, drove them back with whips. Amara and Josiah dragged people toward the trees, shouting for them to run, to scatter, to live. The night became chaos. Fire, blood, smoke, screams. Behind it all, Lucien stood with his hands clasped behind his back, watching the inferno he had created. Watching the people he claimed to own burn and scatter like rats. It was only the beginning. The rebellion had drawn blood, and now Lucien Moreau would unleash horrors that none of them could yet imagine. The quarters burned to ash. For 2 nights, the survivors huddled in the swamp beyond the plantation, their bodies bruised, their lungs raw from smoke. The cries of children echoed through the reeds. Mothers pressed rags over their mouths to quiet them, terrified the riders would hear. Amara sat by the water's edge, her reflection fractured in the ripples. Her face bore the mark of fire, soot smudges, a cut across her cheek. But it was her eyes that had changed. They no longer held only fear. They carried something harder. Josiah crouched beside her, his broad hands tightening around the stolen whip. "We cannot hide forever," he said. "If we scatter, he'll hunt us down one by one. We have to strike first. Kill him tonight." The others gathered, their faces gaunt, their eyes hollow. The children were too weak to move, the elders too frail to run. Every soul turned to Amara. She stood slowly, her voice rough but steady. "Then we take the fight to the big house. Not just fire, not just blades. We end Lucien Moreau, or we end as ashes like the cane." A murmur rose. Agreement. Desperate and trembling. But then a voice broke the fragile unity. Old Samuel, who had always counseled silence, pushed himself to his feet. His hands shook, but his words cut like iron. "No, you'll damn us all. You think you can kill him? You think you can stand against muskets, against sabers, against men bred for slaughter? You'll lead us to graves before dawn." Amara stepped toward him, fire in her tone. "We are already in graves, Samuel. Every lash, every chain, every scream. It is death in slow pieces. I will not wait for him to finish cutting me apart." But Samuel did not flinch. His eyes darted toward the trees. "You do not understand. He cannot be defeated. Not him, not his men. They are too many." And then Amara saw it, the flicker in his eyes, the shift of his shoulders, the guilt that clung to him like sweat. She froze. "What have you done?" Before Samuel could speak, the night split with a whistle. Shrill, sharp, unnatural. Torches flared in the distance. The pounding of hooves shook the earth. The swamp erupted with chaos. Lucien's riders surged from the trees, steel flashing in lantern light. Muskets barked, whips cracked. Children screamed as mothers dragged them deeper into the water. Men threw themselves into the reeds, slashing wildly with knives and sticks. Samuel fell to his knees, sobbing, hands raised. "He promised me life," he wailed. "He promised if I gave him the leaders, he would spare the rest." Amara's blood went cold. Betrayal. It had lived among them, breathed beside them, prayed with them. Josiah roared in fury and struck Samuel down with the whip's iron butt, the old man collapsing into the mud. But there was no time to grieve, no time to rage. Lucien's riders were upon them. The swamp became slaughter. Steel cleaved flesh. Bullets tore through reeds. The water turned dark with blood. Amara dragged a boy to safety, her breath ragged, her body trembling. Josiah fought like a beast, pulling men from horses, drowning them in the muck. His arms painted red, and then silence shattered with a single sound. Lucien's voice. Calm, clear, cold. "Amara." She turned. He stood on the bank, lantern in one hand, pistol in the other. His face glowed with sweat and firelight. He looked untouched, untouchable, as if the swamp itself bent before him. "I told you," he said softly. "You would wish for death." Behind him, riders dragged captives from the water, women sobbing, children kicking, men beaten to the ground. Samuel's lifeless body lay in the mud, his betrayal written in blood and shame. Lucien raised his lantern higher, his eyes never leaving Amara. "Bring her to me." Two riders waded forward, muskets trained, chains clinking. Amara's body screamed to run, but her heart burned hotter than her fear. She clenched her fists, her nails biting deep into her palms. She knew this was no longer just survival. This was war, but wars demanded sacrifice. And in the swamp that night, sacrifice came in screams, in fire, in betrayal that cut deeper than any whip. Amara did not know who would live to see another dawn, but she knew one truth as her wrists were seized, chains cold against her skin. Lucien Moreau would not stop until she was broken, or until he was dead. The chains bit into Amara's wrists as they dragged her through the great house's doors. The marble floors gleamed slick with polish, a cruel mockery of the blood that still stained her dress. The chandeliers glowed overhead, crystal light raining down upon her bent figure. Every step echoed, a sound of triumph for Lucien, a sound of despair for her. They threw her to the floor of the drawing room. Velvet curtains framed tall windows. The air smelled of wine, tobacco, and ash. She coughed, her throat raw, her chest tight with smoke and grief. Lucien entered without hurry. His boots clicked against the floor. His gloves were spotless now, though the night was soaked in carnage. He poured himself a glass of dark wine and sat in his high-backed chair, as though welcoming a guest. "You've cost me much," he said, swirling the glass. "Fields burned, men dead, and still you stand before me, unbroken. I should admire that." Amara lifted her chin despite the chains. "Then kill me and be done with it." Lucien smiled faintly, almost tenderly. "Ah, that would be too kind. Death ends suffering, and I intend to make you understand," he snapped his fingers. The doors opened again. Guards dragged in 3 children, their faces streaked with tears, their small wrists bound. They cried for their mothers, their voices trembling with terror. Amara's stomach turned to stone. "No," she whispered. Lucien leaned forward, his voice soft. "Every rebellion has a price. I will not kill them. That would make martyrs. Instead, they will live. But they will live as reminders, carrying scars they cannot hide. Every time you look at them, you will see what your defiance has done." He gestured, and a guard produced a branding iron, the tip glowing red from the fire. The children screamed. Amara thrashed against her chains, her voice breaking into a cry that shook the room. "Take me! Do it to me!" "Leave them." Lucien's smile sharpened. "Oh, I will. But not before you see what rebellion births." The iron descended. The room filled with the stench of burning flesh. The first child's scream tore through Amara's soul like a blade. She fought against the chains until her wrists bled, until her voice was hoarse. Tears carved tracks down her soot-streaked cheeks. When the guards dragged the children out, their cries fading down the corridor, Amara collapsed to her knees. Her body shook with rage and grief, but she forced herself upright. Her eyes burned into Lucien's, hatred blazing. "You think this will break me?" she whispered, her voice trembling with fury. "But all you've done is forge me. Every scream, every scar, it is iron in my blood now." Lucien studied her for a long moment. His expression was unreadable, caught between fury and fascination. Then he leaned back, sipping his wine as if nothing had happened. "You will break," he said quietly. "Not because of what I do to you, but because of what your defiance costs others. That is the weight you cannot carry." He stood and moved closer, his shadow falling across her. He lifted her chin with one gloved hand, his grip cold and unyielding. "And when you finally kneel, when you beg for mercy, I will know I have won." He released her, and she fell back against the chains. The guards dragged her away, down into the cellar where darkness clung like damp skin. They shackled her to the wall, the stone cold against her back. The iron cuffs dug into her wrists. In the corner, rats scurried. Water dripped from the ceiling, each drop echoing like a clock counting down to something inevitable. Alone, Amara closed her eyes. The screams of the children still rang in her ears, a wound deeper than any lash. Her body ached, her spirit trembled, but somewhere inside the fire still burned. She whispered into the dark, her voice raw but steady. "I will not kneel. Not to him, not ever." And though no one heard it, the words hung in the cellar like a vow, stronger than chains, sharper than steel, above her. The house creaked with the laughter of masters, the clink of glasses, the machinery of power. Below, in the damp dark, Amara's resolve grew. Lucien believed he had broken her, but in truth he had created something far more dangerous, a fire that would not die. The cellar stank of mildew and blood. Days bled into nights, if days and nights could even be measured in a place where no sun shone. Amara's wrists were raw from the shackles. Her throat ached from thirst, yet the fire inside her refused to die. Each night footsteps echoed above her, Lucien's boots, the clink of glasses, the laughter of men who believed themselves untouchable. Each sound carved itself into her memory like a map. She began to count the steps, the hours, the pauses between patrols. She was not waiting for rescue. No one was coming. She was learning. On the 3rd night, a guard descended with bread and water. He was young, his beard thin, his eyes averted as he shoved the crust toward her. Amara caught his wrist. Her voice cracked, but her words were sharp. "You have a mother," the guard froze. "You have a mother," she repeated. "What would she see in your eyes if she knew what you've done? If she knew you served a devil who brands children?" The boy yanked free, face pale, muttering curses to hide the tremor in his voice. He left quickly, but his footsteps stumbled on the stairs. Amara knew then not all men were stone. Some were cracks waiting to split. By the fifth night, the cracks widened. The young guard returned. He lingered too long, his lantern trembling in his hand. Amara watched him, silent, until finally he whispered, "Why don't you break?" "Everyone breaks?" Amara met his gaze, her voice low. "Because I am not a slave in here." She tapped her chest. "Only he is chained to his cruelty. I am free." Something flickered in the boy's eyes. Fear and something else, shame. When he left, he dropped a sliver of metal near the water bowl. A nail, rusted and sharp. Amara stared at it for a long time, her heart pounding. Then she smiled, the first smile in days. That night she began her work. The nail was weak, the cuff stronger. But determination was iron too. Each scrape sent sparks into her blood. Each drop of blood from her wrists was a promise. Hours passed. The rat scurried closer, drawn by the scent of sweat and blood. Her arm screamed with pain. But then on a click, a whisper of freedom. The shackle loosened. Amara froze, breath caught in her throat. She was free, not fully. The other cuff still bound her. But her hand was loose enough to move, to reach, to fight. She tested her strength. She could slip half her body out, though the iron bit her flesh raw. If the chance came, she could escape. The chance came sooner than she expected. On the seventh night, Lucien descended himself. His boots clicked against the stone. He carried no lantern. His shadow filled the room like a curse. He crouched before her, studying her face. "You still breathe," he said softly. "Good, I need you alive. Alive to watch every soul you love be torn apart." Amara stared back, silent. The fire in her eyes burned hotter than his lantern ever could. Lucien leaned closer, so close she could feel the cold of his breath. "But perhaps I've underestimated you. Perhaps pain is not enough." He raised a knife, the blade gleaming. "Perhaps hunger, silence, solitude. Perhaps these will make you beg." As his hand lowered, Amara moved. Her free wrist shot forward. The nail still clutched in her palm. She slashed. Blood sprayed across the cellar stones. Lucien recoiled with a snarl, his cheeks split open, crimson running down his jaw. "You dare," but Amara's voice rose above his rage. Hoarse, cracked, yet thunderous, "I will never kneel." Lucien staggered back, clutching his wound, his eyes wild with fury and disbelief. For a heartbeat, the mask of control shattered, and beneath it she saw the truth. Fear. He stormed up the stairs, shouting for guards, his voice trembling with wrath. The cellar door slammed shut. Amara sagged against the wall, the nail slippery with her own blood. Her chest heaved. Her heart roared. She had not escaped. Not yet. But she had drawn his blood. The devil could bleed, and if he could bleed, he could die. The wound on Lucien's cheek festered like a brand of humiliation. He kept it stitched and covered, but whispers spread through the house. Servants spoke in hushed voices. The girl had cut him. A slave had drawn the master's blood. For Lucien, that was more dangerous than fire in the cane fields. It was an idea, and ideas were deadlier than muskets. He returned to the cellar with soldiers at his side. Torches threw wild shadows across the stone. Amara lifted her head, chains rattling, her eyes burning with defiance. Lucien's voice was calm, too calm. "You've given me scars, Amara. Now I will give you something to match." He motioned to his men. They unrolled a leather bundle, revealing tools gleaming in the firelight. Iron hooks, whips studded with bone, clamps that glinted like teeth. The guard strapped Amara to an upright wooden frame. Her arms stretched wide, wrists bound tight. The air reeked of oil and sweat. Lucien stepped close, eyes glittering. "You wanted to prove I could bleed. But you forget I control whether you live to see tomorrow." The first lash struck. The whip tore skin from her back, blood spraying. Amara clenched her teeth, refusing to cry out. Another lash, another. Each one carved rivers of fire into her flesh. The guards looked away, unable to meet her gaze. Lucien struck again and again, until the stone floor was wet with red. Still, Amara would not scream. Her silence was defiance sharper than steel. Lucien's rage boiled over. He seized the iron brand from the fire, its tip glowing white-hot. He pressed it close to her cheek, the heat searing her skin though it had not yet touched. "Beg," he hissed. "Beg and I will stop." Amara forced her eyes open. Pain blurred her vision, but her voice, broken and raw, carried through the cellar. "You think this pain will silence me? You've only given me your weakness. You bleed, you rage, you fear me, and that will be your undoing." Lucian trembled with fury. He pressed the brand against her shoulder. Flesh sizzled. The smell of burning skin filled the chamber. This time, Amara screamed. The sound echoed like thunder through the house. Lucian's smile returned, cold and cruel. When it was done, they cut her loose and let her fall into the filth. She lay shaking, skin blistered, vision dim. Yet even then, her whisper reached him. "You cannot kill what you've already created. You made me into fire, and fire always spreads, meanwhile, outside the house." In the slave quarters, whispers moved faster than chains could silence. The fields were ash, but spirits had not burned. Josiah, scarred from lashings, gathered men and women in the dead of night. "They took her," he said, voice low but fierce. "But she is not gone. She fights still. She cuts him. She bleeds him. And now he tortures her because he fears her." The slaves huddled close, fear in their eyes. Yet hope sparked in their silence. Josiah unrolled a crude map scratched into parchment with coal. "The armory is here. Muskets, powder. We take them, we take the house. The fields may burn, but tonight the master's bloodline ends." An elder shook his head. "His men are many. Their guns will cut us down." Josiah's hand clenched into a fist. "Then we die standing, not kneeling." A murmur of agreement rippled through the room. Even those who trembled felt it. The fire Amara had lit was alive in them too. They began to plan. They smuggled knives hidden in baskets, stole powder from careless guards, passed messages in songs, in rhythms tapped on wood, in lullabies sung to children, and always Amara's name burned in their whispers. She was more than flesh now. She was the symbol of what they could be, unbroken, unchained, back in the cellar. Amara drifted in and out of consciousness, her skin scorched, her body broken. But in her dreams, she saw fire spreading through cane fields, smoke rising like banners of war. She saw chains falling, muskets lifted, Lucien's house crumbling. When her eyes fluttered open, she found herself not alone. The young guard knelt in the shadows, lantern dim. His face pale, eyes wide. He held out a flask of water, trembling. "You're not supposed to live through this," he whispered. "But you won't die, will you?" Amara's cracked lips formed a ghost of a smile. "Not until he does." The boy swallowed hard, glancing at the door. Then with trembling hands, he slipped a small dagger beneath her chains. "I can't free you now," he said. "But when the night comes, you'll need this." And Amara closed her fingers around the blade, weak, bleeding, but alive. For the first time since her capture, she felt something stronger than pain. Hope sharpened into steel. The night was thick with silence, heavy as a held breath. In the slave quarters, no songs were sung, no fires burned. Every man, woman, and child lay awake, waiting. Josiah stood in the shadows, his scarred hands gripping an old musket stolen from the armory. Around him, others clutched blades carved from farm tools, hammers wrapped in cloth to muffle their strike, and torches bound tight with oil-soaked rags. "This is the night," Josiah whispered. "For every lash, for every chain, for every life stolen. Tonight we rise." A murmur swept the room, fear, yes, but also fury. Feet shifted in the dust. Hearts beat like drums of war. The first torch was lit. Its flame flickered against faces that had known only submission. Now they carried rebellion in their eyes, in the cellar. Amara stirred. The dagger the young guard had given her lay hidden beneath straw. Her body screamed with pain, but her mind burned clear as iron. Above, she heard it, faint at first, then louder. A crack of musket fire, a scream. The unmistakable roar of men shouting in alarm. The uprising had begun. Her pulse quickened. She closed her fingers around the dagger. Its edge was crude but sharp enough. Tonight, either she would escape or she would carve her name into the stones with blood. The door burst open. A guard stumbled in, panting, musket half raised. His face was pale with panic. "They're right." He never finished. Amara lunged, the dagger flashing. The blade slid beneath his jaw, silencing him in a gurgle of blood. His musket clattered to the floor, her chains rattled. The other cuff still held her ankle, but she worked fast, sawing the dagger through flesh and bone until her skin was raw. With a final wrench, the shackle snapped free from her swollen wrist. For the first time in days, Amara stood, shaking, bloodied, but unbroken. She snatched the musket, loaded and ready, and pressed herself against the doorframe. Above her, chaos thundered. Outside the manor, the slaves struck with fire. Torches hurled into the cane fields. Oil splashing across the storehouses. Flames leapt skyward, turning night into hellfire. Lucien's men scrambled, shouting orders, muskets firing wild into the darkness. But the rebels came from all sides, silent as shadows, swift as blades. Josiah charged at the first guard, burying his hammer into the man's skull. Blood sprayed across his chest as he roared, "For the boy they killed! For Amara!" Others echoed his cry. The night became a chorus of vengeance. Flames devoured the fields. Lighting faces twisted not in fear but in rage. Children screamed, women wielded knives, men swung torches. The plantation was no longer a house of chains but a battlefield. Back in the manor, Lucian stormed through the halls, his wounded cheek raw beneath its bandage, his pistol drawn. "Kill them all," he shouted. "Burn their hovels to ash." His men hesitated. The fire was spreading fast, their numbers thinning. But Lucien's voice cracked like a whip. "Obey or hang beside them." He turned toward the cellar. His scar throbbed. Rage festered. She was the root of this rebellion, Amara. If she still lived, he would make her death a spectacle so terrifying it would break every last survivor. He flung open the cellar door and froze. The chains lay broken on the floor. Blood smeared the walls. The guard's body slumped in the corner, throat carved open, and Amara stood before him, musket leveled at his chest. For the first time, Lucien saw her not as a slave, not as prey, but as an executioner. She pulled the trigger. The musket roared. The shot tore across his shoulder, spinning him back against the doorframe. He howled, blood spraying across the walls. Amara advanced, dagger in her free hand, her voice like fire. "You said you controlled whether I lived. But tonight, I choose whether you die." Lucien staggered upright, clutching his wound, eyes blazing with hate. "You think you've won," he spat. "You think fire and knives will take this house? I will grind every one of you into the dirt." Amara pressed the musket barrel to his chest. "Not tonight." Before she could fire again, another guard crashed into the room, musket raised. The shot rang out. Amara threw herself aside, pain lancing her arm as the ball grazed her flesh. She slashed the dagger upward, ripping across the guard's throat. He collapsed, gurgling at her feet. Lucian used the chaos to stumble back, clutching his bleeding shoulder. His eyes burned with a promise of vengeance. "This isn't over," he snarled, before vanishing into the smoke-filled halls. The house above burned. Amara staggered up the steps, musket in one hand, dagger in the other. Her back blazed with wounds, but her spirit burned hotter than the fires consuming the plantation. She emerged into the courtyard, and the sight struck her breathless. The slaves had risen. Flames lit their faces as they fought, as they killed, as they shouted her name. Amara. It echoed like thunder. The plantation that had been a prison for generations was now a battlefield of freedom. And she, bloodied but unbroken, was no longer a prisoner. She was their leader,